Please. Oh. Yeah, grab everything. Yeah, I think I need to try and make it over 15 minutes. So
Yeah, that's
I'll
fine.
just run through the questions. But Jordan, thank you for sitting down to speak with us today about employability in sports media. In terms of the topic we're covering today, it's just about gaining experience in sports media. Before we get on to that, can you just give us a bit of a background of what you've done and what you're currently doing?
So at the moment, I'm just about to start with the Football Association of Wales in an engagement executive role. For the last 3.5 years, I've been working as a football reporter. Starting off, I was with Bristol World, so I was covering Bristol City and Bristol Rovers every week. Would be whoever's at home, but I'd also be going to press conferences as well. Then about 18 months ago, my role changed, in which I was working fully from home, but I was working for various different websites. So I was covering Birmingham, I was covering Preston, Blackpool, Portsmouth, for example. And yeah, now I'm ready to start the Football Association of Wales.
Obviously a vast experience there. In terms of getting into sports media, why do you think it's important for people to get out and gain experience of sort of different aspects of the role?
Yeah, so I didn't cover in the previous question, but yeah, I also, my background mainly, my unique selling point, as it was described in university, was running a club Pêl Droed, and it was a Welsh domestic football website, and that was run on a volunteer basis. It was covering semi-professional and amateur football, and that experience was like really vital to me because I was someone really, I remember being on a press conference, Wales Women's press conference, and I was scared to ask questions, to be honest. And so I would come away from the press conferences writing a story, but I wouldn't have contributed to that press conference. I didn't ask any questions. And then from being asking those questions to say a normal person, just someone who's playing as some professional or amateur football, I gained the confidence then to speak in press conferences. I was speaking to professionals, that sometimes I'd have been starstruck by, and I think it's really important to put yourself out there and get some experience, because ultimately when you're applying for jobs after you finished university, they want to see the experience there. It's all good being, say, getting second class honours or first class honours, but they also want to see what you're doing outside. And I can appreciate for students it's very difficult, especially in this current climate, to be doing your studies and then potentially needing a job to fund your studies. But if you can do some free work in your own time, admittedly it won't be paid, it may be vital for you in regards to getting additional money when you're starting to apply for jobs, because they'll see that you're doing extracurricular stuff and it will benefit you in the long term.
Yeah, it's definitely a very important aspect. Interested in you speaking about sort of covering events and press conferences. Even in my short time of doing it, I feel sort of the same way. It's almost sort of like a imposter syndrome, where you're at these big events, you see in these sort of stars, different athletes. How did you sort of overcome or sort of overlook that sort of first initial fear or of asking a question at press conferences and things like that?
I think the first thing was that, for me, is that I was just kind of, some of these press conferences, I was just listening to what kind of the questions are, and then try and note down the flow of it. Sometimes you've got to just understand how these press conferences work. A lot of the time, the agendas have already been set before the press conference. You've got your questions, and the journalists have got their questions in mind, and they'll ask them this, and sometimes it can take you in a different direction. But I suppose it's kind of like going from being a supporter to actually being a professional in that mindset. So sometimes a football supporter might be angry or upset that they're not asked, that the managers aren't being asked a question on a particular topic. But if you go all gung-ho in that press conference, then you kind of affect your relationship with them, and they might not give you something. So yeah, for me it was a case of kind of just trying to monitor how press conferences work out, and then there's different things to consider as well. It's kind of the order of how a press conference goes, because sometimes in my experience it's kind of the BBC, the biggest organisation, one of the biggest organisations, probably the biggest in this country, they tend to go first, and then it's a local paper or a smaller outlet, and then it's yourself. So you're going last, and you're trying to think of questions that haven't been asked, or you're trying to expand on them as well. So there's so many like things to consider. But yeah, I think I just monitored how a press conference went, spoke to people as if it was a professional game. So when I go to like a Cymru Premier game, which is mainly semi-professional, I go to a lower league game and kind of watch how the pros do it, ask them, and then see what kind of answers I get. And then kind of like there isn't that mental barrier there anymore. Then you're just speaking to a normal person. Admittedly, there's more about them, and what they say will be reported to a bigger audience. But yeah, kind of like if you speak to people, a normal person who's just like in their full-time job, and then you speak to them at the weekend and they're a sporting person, that's how you get it really, is you ultimately experience is key.
Yeah, it's very much learning on the job, and getting to go to these events, stuff like press conferences, is where you fully understand the role. How important would you say it is for people to get out and experience stuff like that? And what suggestions would you give to sort of people wanting to go to these events or press conferences, how to get those opportunities?
Yeah, I'd say that like kind of like you got to do your grounding first sometimes. I know that like for a student it might be great they're going to say a professional game, whether it be a national team game or say like a professional team, Cardiff City, Swansea for example. But then sometimes that complacency can kick in, that you think, oh, like I'm covering like a championship game here, like I don't need to cover the lower league games and that. But like really, it's kind of like trying to be unique in a way as well, is that if you are going to say like a professional sporting event, you've got to try and be different to everyone else. Admittedly, you've got to learn how to do your match reports and your post-match pieces, for example, but also you need to think, how am I going to tell a story that's going to be different to someone else? Because admittedly, someone might go to the BBC and want to know how the game panned out. They might not want to go to a student outlet. So if a student outlet or the person who's volunteering their own time has got to think, well, maybe I've got to do something different here. Maybe I've got to do some talking points from this press conference or talking points from this game, because then someone go, oh, well, you're building your image up. So I'd say, yeah, is that kind of, it's important to like be out there. But admittedly, I just think that you've got to like really put yourself out there, the places that not a lot of people would go to, and sometimes it can work in the long term, for example. So if I'm thinking, when I was a student at the University of South Wales, I was assigned the women's rugby team, and my background was football, but I put a lot of effort into that, and I'd interview these players week in, week out, and cover the team. And now I think one of the players is playing for the Saracens, and she's a fully pledged like Wales international. I think she's got like more than 10 caps and that, playing on the Six Nations and major tournaments. And that just shows that if you put the grounding in and you cover, say, like the lesser fancied sports or the lesser fancied teams and leagues, that sometimes like you're kind of like investing in some stuff, because this player might then go on to be great. So for example, another example is Will Evans. Like he was playing for Cardiff Met in the Cymru Premier, and like I built up a really good relationship with him and the other players, and now he's playing in the Football League, bought for a six-figure fee, playing in League One and everything. And like I'm friends with him, and I know him, and if I see him, like that's how you get over your mental barriers. And some of the first questions as well is a kind of, you're just building up relationships with these people as well.
Yeah, and in terms of experiencing, like, I suppose when you first get into trying to cover sports, you will sort of stick towards what you know. Like, if someone's got a football background and enjoys football, but how important do you think it is to sort of mix up your sports, get to know different things, and put yourself in the deep end to sort of prepare yourself and make yourself a better journalist, I suppose? Yeah,
so like in the first year of when I was in university, I was put on netball, and like I was like the first sport like that, and I knew nothing about netball, and it was really tough, to be honest, because like the people, I don't think they were aware really like of like what we were doing, so I tried to like take my football aspect into that and like interview people and treat it as like and that was difficult. But then the women's rugby thing changed. It's kind of like a catch-22 situation really, because it's good to, I suppose, be versatile and cover multiple sports, because there's not a lot of jobs out there just focus on one sport. Like if you're working for, like, say, a big outlet like the BBC or another big organisation like Wales Online, for example, in Wales, like you kind of like need to be versatile. Is that like if someone's off for football that week, you need to be able to cover football. But if there's a rugby reporters unavailable for that weekend, maybe they like need you. Like, and so like yeah, it's kind of important that you're able to like step into their shoes if someone's out there. As well, but there's also another situation where like if you're keeping yourself too versatile, then you're not like specialising in one thing. And like I was told that like a unique selling point was really key when I was in university, and kind of like that's what's got me to where I am today, is that ultimately I kind of did put my eggs in one basket really. I had the experience of netball and women's rugby, but like I specialised in Welsh domestic football, which is kind of a niche market. And like deservedly, like I've got my opportunity in the industry, even though it took me to cover English football, and now I'm back in Welsh football. Ultimately, like I focus on my USP, so it's kind of like a balancing act really, in that it's good to be versatile, but also it's good to have something that like you're well and truly focusing on and you're building a reputation for.
Yeah, and in terms of when you're working, getting these sort of experiences, what skills do you think you build as you're working through these different events and stuff like that to help you become better at sports media or being a journalist and things like that?
Yeah, a lot, to be honest. Like I was, like I said, mentioned being nervous, like asking questions and everything, but then now like I'm capable of like setting up like an interview where like storytelling is key really for me. I think like one of my best traits is like storytelling, in that like I know how a story like kind of needs to flow, to be honest. Like I came from like a creative media background as well, so like the importance of like if there's a film, like you've got to tell a story in the first 10 minutes, and kind of I've applied that to like sports as well, where like you've got to really get the big point across first and then just put a bit more detail into there, and then you get to your end destination. So storytelling is key. I'd say I'm capable with technology as well, so setting up some equipment and like and then obviously post-production stuff and editing that as well. So like that's my background, is that like previously like the opinion of like a sports journalist was really like you just be writing, and admittedly like that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years, but in any other roles there's an expectation now to not just be doing writing but doing video content as well. So you've got to be versatile to be able to do like podcasting, you've got to be able to do video interviews, keep people engaged, to be honest. And like it is tough, but like yeah, I'd say a lot of journalists these days have to be multimedia. They can't just be like what it was before, where you're just focusing on written content.
Yeah, and I think that we've spoken about in terms of being on the course is more important than ever really in the age of social media, where you know people are after information and news so quickly and things just get thrown out so fast. But how important do you think, alongside sort of getting the experience you do get, putting that out on social media, showcasing your work and sort of building a personal brand, how important do you think that is for people trying to break into the industry?
Yeah, that's really key, to be honest, because like even when I was covering like university sport here, like my website had already been set up by then, but they knew what the website was. So even before like I had met some of the university footballers, like I'd known who they played for at the club of the weekend, and that was like kind of a foot in the door. So when I was covering the university football team, they knew who I was, and they knew that I was respected, and they could trust me when I'm speaking to them, that they have that as well. And so yeah, it is key, to be honest, because like ultimately like that's your evidence really. If you're not like putting things out there of the work that you're doing, then not everyone's there to see it. So if you can build up a social media platform that's building followers and you share regular content as well, when you come to a job interview and they're going like, what content have you done? You go like, here's the content that I've done. And sometimes you can look at your old content and you can redevelop that into a newer thing. So you can be like, oh well, I did this story where I'm thinking here's 5 like Cymru Premier players to watch out for in the future, and then you can replicate that if you go into, say, for example, a different sport, and you go in 5 boxing stars to keep an eye out for in Wales in the next few years, for example. So like you're kind of like keeping track of your own work, but also you're allowing everyone else to see it as well. So that ultimately there are some challenges that come with that, is that not everyone's forgiving on social media. So like they might think, oh, like maybe you've got some slight bit of information wrong, or a statistic's wrong, and some people will be the first to mention that as well. And sometimes you've got to deal with that, correct your work, and then hopefully you learn from that as well. But yes, there are challenges to putting your stuff on social media as well, and it's not going to be plain sailing. Not everyone's going to agree with your content. They might not even understand your background. They might just think that this is like a professional outlet, for example. Some people like aren't aware like of what a student outlet is compared to, say, like a bigger outlet. So there are challenges, but yeah, I'd say that ultimately you've got to put your work out there, and everyone's got to see it.
Yeah, I suppose especially across social media as well, you can get a lot of backlash. You've obviously worked with a number of sort of big clubs and covering clubs, and have probably at times had to do have days at work were quite difficult, where you're probably sharing information that people don't want to hear, or the clubs are in a difficult position and the fans, their backs are up. And how difficult is that when you're sort of working in this industry and you're putting stuff out on social media and get a lot of backlash for it, maybe personal messages? How difficult is that to deal with?
Yeah, it's really difficult, because sometimes, like in the job that I had, like you'd have to do player ratings, for example, and luckily I've not had any players like share their grievances that as well. But that's a difficult job. It's a kind of like, it's your opinion. You've got to put your opinion like on the line on that as well. And then some fans, they might be like, oh, what game were you at, for example? Like if they disagree with your opinion, you've got to like set that up, because like that's like your opinion, that's what you're getting paid for to say, because like ultimately you're in that position because the organisations are respecting you, and they think that like you're in a strong enough position to share your opinions as well. But yeah, like it is a difficult one, to be honest, like having to deal with like obviously whatever comes on social media as well, but sometimes you've just got to try and like block it out. And just focus. If you think that you're doing a good job, and if most of the work that you feel is doing well, and you have people that are going, oh, you're doing a great job and everything, try and accept that, to be honest. Admittedly, like not everyone's going to agree they like your work or something and that, but like ultimately if try and dwell a bit more on the positive side of things rather than trying to focus on the negatives.
Yeah, and one thing we have sort of covered a lot through the topics we've discussed today is connections and contacts with people. I feel like, especially from what I've sort of experienced over my time of doing the course, is connections is a very important aspect of the role, and it opens up so many doors. How important do you think it is to make connections with people, and yeah, just sort of being able to open those doors and give you experiences for the future then?
Yeah, it was really key. Like I think it was either the first or second year of university, and I'd been doing some stuff on Welsh domestic football, and I got into a position where I was able to appear on like the official Cymru Premier podcast, and the guy who hosted it works at the BBC, and someone came to him asking if he knew of anyone who could help him out with their coverage of the 2018 like World Cup. Admittedly, I didn't go out there, but like they needed someone to like do some work for them. So ultimately, I managed to do some of that work for them, because like I put myself in a position where I was someone that could be trusted to do a reliable job for them as well. And then from my work with Club Pal Droid, I was able to get a placement at the BBC, because they were like, well, like we can trust you to do that. And then I managed to do a feature video with the Penamont manager, Reach Griffiths, because he'd just been promoted to the Cymru Premier, and I was telling like a featured story, and people could see clearly like that I knew how to tell a story, that I knew how to ask questions, and I was confident enough in that position to interview him. So that's ultimately like because of how I marketed myself and how I was trusted to speak to people in that kind of those circles in the Cymru Premier, that was able to meet and then get a good piece of content as well. So it is really key to like ensure you've got connections, not only to the subjects that you're speaking to, but also people that are in the industry, because ultimately, like, media sometimes is an industry where it doesn't pay well, and you have.
Like to go on.
Can I pause for a second?
Yeah, let's try and get these back on. What are we looking at? That's a good 20 minutes anyway. I'll ask our question again, we'll just go through.
Oh, that's fine.
A topic we've sort of covered a lot through what we've discussed today is connections and sort of connecting with people, getting through these different experiences. How important would you say that is for someone trying to break into the media industry?
Yeah, I'd say it's really key, to be honest. When I was in university, because of what I'd been doing with Welsh domestic football, I'd been able to appear on a podcast, the official Cymru Premier podcast, and the guy that hosted that, someone asked him if he knew of anyone that could help provide coverage for the 2018 World Cup. And he put me forward, and ultimately that was an opportunity that I got just from having connections. And then from me continuing my work with my own website, I was able to get a placement at the BBC over the summer. And that was really beneficial, because then a lot of the stuff that I was doing some domestic content for the BBC, and I think the people that saw the work that I did on Club Pal Droid were like, oh, there's some stuff on the BBC now, this is great, like, let's populate that. So sometimes you can kind of change a way that, like, an organisation does their content, because you can show them that this content does well and we need to do this. As well, and then from my placement at the BBC, I was able to speak to the Pen y Bont manager. I did a feature on him because it was the first season that they were in the Cymru Premier, and because he'd spoken to me before, he'd known of the work, he could trust me, and I was just working in a different capacity. I was working for someone else, and so it is, like, really key. And so yeah, that's kind of two sides to it. Is that sometimes you need to keep people around you that are gonna be able to offer you or suggest some opportunities. So, like, yeah. A lot of the time, if you're working, say, behind the camera, if you're a good producer or a good commentator, someone might consider you for, like, the job. They might go, I like how that person sounds, like, let's have them, like, on a commentary, or I like their knowledge of it, so, like, let's use them as a pundit, for example. So it is really key, but also then having the connections really in sports as well is key. If you know a sports person or a sports coach who might have information, say, like, if you're trying to, like, put a story together, like, whether it be transfers or something, then it's key for them as well, because then, like, they could share some information with you, or just anyone who's inside, you can get some inside information, and you can, like, build yourself a reputation as someone that can be respected and making news first. So yeah, it is key to have connections on both sides, really, and then obviously the key part of that is it is able to get your foot in the door as well.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something I've experienced, even through the course. It's someone you could probably meet, and then, like, 18 months down the line, something pops up, and it's just being in the back of someone's mind, I suppose. And even, like you said, with covering news, if something happens and you know a person involved, it's just a lot more helpful to be able to call them or message them and just get a bit more information. Just a final question from me today. If you were to give one piece of advice to someone looking to break into sports media and sort of gain experience in the area, what would you say to them?
I definitely say volunteer. As I've said, I can appreciate in this current climate that, like, it's not everyone's able to do that because of how finances work. But if you can, I know that, like, sometimes there is that balance between having a work life and also having leisure time and a social life as well. But whilst you're in university, that's your opportunity, really. You're bound by your studies, but you also have an opportunity here to, like, have a free run at it. Where, like, if you can volunteer with a club, or you can volunteer with a news organisation, that can really help you in the long term, because ultimately, if you're a first class honours student and you've got a bags full, like, of experience behind you, like, that's great. You could be a first class honours student but not have as much experience about you. You could be academically gifted, and that, but people want to see experience, people want to see you out there in the industry and know your name as well. So I'd say definitely volunteer if you can, and don't like be snobby like at the opportunities like that come that your way. Yes, it'd be great if you get a placement at a big organisation, but say if you're just starting out your studies in your first year, don't be afraid to go to an amateur or semi-professional football team, because most of the time you get a free reign at it. Like you can run their social media completely, and then you can learn from that experience, and then you can go that experience at a lower league club might then help you go and help a professional club who can tell you a different way of doing it, but you can also show them that I did this for this particular club, and they might think that that's a good idea as well. So like, yeah, definitely one key message is to volunteer, put yourself out there, and ultimately you'll build like loads of relationships with people who will really appreciate your work, and then ultimately when you graduate you'll have a really good CV, versatile, but you'll also be academically gifted as well.
That's great, thank you very much. All sorted.
Good.
Oh.
Let's cut off half of my body and put it to the table. Like, I didn't realise I was like sat like this for